I just got sicker and sicker to the point where I wasn't really having these experiences anymore. I was just so ill that all I could do was just lay in bed, and exist. And at the lowest point of that it was December of 2022, December 21st of 2022. I will never forget that day. I was lying in bed, again, just existing and meditating. That was all I had been doing. Just when I wasn't asleep, I was just meditating. And that had gone on for weeks at that point. But I was just laying in bed, meditating, and all of a sudden I perceive that I'm being lifted up out of my body again. I go through the ceiling, and then I'm aware of lying on a table in what was obviously an alien craft. And I was completely freaked out. I wasn't frightened, but it was like, wait a minute. I think I'm on a spaceship. I was lying on this table, and the craft was really organic. It was strange because if I kind of looked off in the distance, it would resolve itself. And it was like there was another room beyond where I was that I could see. And there was like a bank of computers and a large window that looked out onto outer space. But then if I pulled my attention back to my immediate surroundings, that went away and like a wall formed. And I was aware of there being these gray beings around me, tall. I mean, they were tall, but they were your stereotypical grays. And they told me, they said, don't worry, you're here. You know, we've been with you your whole life. Like, we've been doing this your whole life. Don't worry. We're just examining you. And they had this scanner type thing, and they ran it down my body, and I could feel like my body being taken apart molecule by molecule, and then like being put back together. And this was all telepathic. And I got like this information download all of a sudden. You know, I knew that they'd been monitoring me my entire life. They were interested in my health. They had been watching my family. They were interested in my DNA. They were interested in my family. This had been going on my entire life. And just these thoughts came into my mind while they were doing this scan. And then as the scan completed, this giant praying mantis appears at my feet at the end of this thing. And I'm like, what is happening? Because I knew nothing about this. I had no idea. I'm like, why is there a big praying mantis? Well, what is happening? This is not rational. I don't even know what's happening. And that mantis being, again, so much love. And I felt that same energy in my heart chakra area that I had felt when I was with my spirit guide. When we went to that other realm, it was that same energetic signature when I saw this mantis. And this mantis was like, it's okay. We're your family. You're loved. Everything's going to be okay. And then then I was back to kind of communicating with the grays again. And there was this holographic screen that they started showing me, this really sped up film of like hieroglyphic symbols and images of like sunrises and oceans and nuclear bombs going off and natural disasters, you know, floods, earthquakes, wars. These images were just flashing past. Just, I could barely take in what was happening. And I, you know, I'm like, why are you showing me this? And they're like, and what they communicated to me at that time was, you will be healed when the time is right. There's a purpose to all of this. And then I felt myself just drop back down into my bed. And then I'm back in the bed in my bedroom. And there's this palpable, like, static energy in the room. And then the lights start flashing on and off. And then that was the end of that experience. But the only way, and then I sort of just went down the rabbit hole after that, trying to figure out what on earth happened. And that's when I started linking into other experiencer accounts and figuring out that all of this stuff is very normal, and mantises are a thing. And I mean, that experience just completely changed my life. And from that point on, I have had a conscious connection to my main spirit guide, who later revealed to me that she is in fact a mantis, that she is a giant white mantis, who wears, this sort of iridescent robe, and she's ancient and so warm and so loving. And the night that I saw those 5 beings around my bed, she was one of them, and the other 4 are also mantises. And they are, I call them the 5, but they're my spirit team, and they're all mantises, of different species. And they kind of have tried to explain to me, like, how mantises work, and that they, exist in multiple dimensions, multiple densities. They're related to the insects on Earth. And, but over that time, I've deepened my relationship with the mantis beings. I've had lots of other mantis experiences, and lots of conscious contact. There's a space that they have created for me, and they told me that they created this place for me out of my memories, but it's this sort of astral place that I call the field. And I can go there, conscious, like through meditation. I can go to the field and I can summon them, and they will come in a craft. And they have taken me on board the craft several other times. Otherwise, they just kind of, they'll show up in my bedroom, and they show up in other places, but I always have these craft experiences from the field. I've been taken to other mantis realms. My guide took me to a place once that was this indigo realm, that it was, again, this vast space that was sort of this deep indigo, and it was filled with these luminous indigo filaments. And my guide explained to me that this was sort of an interdimensional space where mantids lived, and they used this space to travel between the dimensions, and she had taken me there to see that. She's like, this is the mantis home. And so they have given me some of these insights into mantis world and mantis things. And that contact, like I said, it's conscious contact now, and it's ongoing up to the present day.
Do you remember enough of what you saw? Being on that craft, being on that table, your surroundings, the type of medical instruments, if you could get into the details.
There was no instrumentation other than, there was a bright light that was coming down on me from above, but I don't remember seeing a light fixture. The light just seemed to come from nowhere. Like, there was lighting, but there were no lights, that I could see. And there was no obvious medical equipment except for this large flat plate thing that when I was underneath it, I could see like computer readout type things on the surface. It was just like a big sheet of glass that I could see, digital readouts on. And this was the scanner that they moved down my body when I felt like they were taking me apart molecule by molecule. That's the only piece of technology that I saw when I was on the ship. And the room that I was in, there were otherwise no details in the room itself other than, when I kind of looked past the room and that wall sort of organically disappeared, I could see beyond it into what was presumably another part of the craft, which, as I said, there were those computer banks and then a window that showed outer space. But those are all the details that I've had. And I think when I go aboard the craft, it's always that same craft.
In December of 2022, you stood in the field at nighttime looking at a large craft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, December 2022 was when I was taken aboard the craft for that initial experience. But then subsequent experiences that I have in the field were after December 2022. The first time I ever went to the field, I was just lying in bed, and again, I had this out of body, and I don't know where I go in these. I don't know if it's astral. I don't know where I go, but I found myself, I was in a car driving down this road. It was nighttime. It was obviously a rural road that was very overgrown. There was overhanging trees and foliage, and it was this, like 2-lane dirt road that I was traveling down in a car. And I park the car and I get out and I walk out into this field, and it's this open space with grass about up to my knees. And, there's this kind of ozone smell in the air. You can hear like frog noise and other, rural type noises. I can see trees off, in the distance, like silhouetted on the skyline. And when I walked out into this field, then all of a sudden there was this triangle craft over top of me, and they took me up into the craft for another medical adjustment. But I have found that I can intentionally go to the field and the craft will come. Like I can go there that I can intentionally put myself there as well and interact with them. Although they don't always come. There was one time I went there because I wanted to talk to them and they didn't show up. And then, and this was just a few months ago, and my main Mantis guide, came to me the next day, and she was sort of like, sorry about that. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot going on right now. We're kind of busy. We can't always get to you, but we're here. And she's the one that's very loving, and she's around all the time. The other 4 Mantis also very loving, but they all have completely different personalities, and they're much more business-like. And one evening they came I called them because I was really sick again, and they came to do a little tweak, and they were very business-like. You could tell they came and they were kind of like, we're here because you called, and we care about you, and we love you, and we want to do this for you. But they were business-like. They were like, we got to get in, get out. Sorry. Lots of other stuff going on. So it's funny, just the kind of personalities that I see attached to some of these beings as well. Like they're very real to me. And yeah, it's clear to me they've been around my entire life.
You sent me an image of you being on a table, and the mantids are all around you, and they're sending you this purple vapor. Now, what's that?
Yeah, that was another experience that I had on board the craft. It was another healing adjustment period where the 5 were on this craft with me, and they were gathered around the bed, and this purple vapor came out of their hands, for want of a better word, their little appendages, they were holding them over me, and this purple vapor came out of it and just kind of surrounded me. And that was part of the treatment.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I guess the other real mic drop part of this story is what happened in summer of 2024. Because when I had the on-craft experience in 2022, they told me at that time, I would be healed when the time is right. And, I'd been bedbound for 4 years. I was in an extremely debilitated state. And one day, last summer, I woke up and I felt different. And I was able to get up and walk around my house a little bit. And, over the next few days, I had this rapid improvement up to the place where, I am not 100% well. I don't know that I could ever completely resume a normal life. I don't think I'm well enough to work, but I am able to get out of bed and be somewhat functional. I have some functional capacity now, which, given where I was at that one time, is just, it's miraculous. And there's no other way that I can account for it except that the beings told me that this would happen when the time was right. And it has been very clear to me ever since that has happened that I'm getting these really strong messagings to be, that I've been awakened and put in the present state, allowed to have this amount of healing so that I can work with experiencers and other people who are coming into their awakening journeys at this time. And I do have to say, this was another thing that I didn't say when I was talking about that first on-craft experience. I did come home with a triangle mark on the inside of my forearm, which was really strange. It popped up. It was this almost perfectly equilateral triangle, these 3 dots on the inside of my arm that were like bruises. And they were there immediately after I came back from that experience, and they were there for a few days afterward, and then they just disappeared again. And it was unusual enough at the time that I took a picture of it, because I thought, this is so weird. What is this thing on my arm? Because it was almost perfectly triangular, and it occurred after I had come back from the craft. And I had another very small triangular mark appear on the base of my thumb one time, but those were the only 2 times I've ever had body marks that I know of.
In September of 2024, you had another UFO sighting. What happened?
Let's see. Was that the night that I saw another craft out in the backyard? And this was also accompanied by an orb that, there's some trees that are fairly close to my house, and I had seen the lights that I usually see out there. And I was standing out on my patio, and all of a sudden I see this orb, this kind of glowing orange orb floating out, close to the tree line. And I watched that for a while, and it kind of floated around and came, a good bit closer to me, and then kind of moved away again, and it was there for a while before it disappeared. And that same night, there were also 2 or 3 really bright white flashes, like a flash bulb, from those same trees near where I saw that orange orb. And I have seen those orange orbs a couple of other times, and I did manage to get some film. I did manage to get a video of that orange orb 2 or 3 weeks ago. I managed it. get it on, because it keeps appearing. And what's bizarre is my husband can't see it. Because I've told him, that I see these things and he wants to see too. And I woke him up one night when I was seeing these things, and he couldn't see them.
You had an experience that you were sitting at the kitchen table and you had an urge to go outside.
Yeah, that was also last summer. I was sitting at the table and some voice just said, get up, go outside. So I did. And I walked out to the edge of my patio, and I had this really strong urge to just lift my hands up, stretch them out in front of me. And when I did, I was able to perceive this kind of purplish, like, membrane. And that when I pressed up against it with my hand, it was like you could see this distortion in this purple kind of glow, like I was pressing up against a membrane. And I had this intuitive thing to just, test it. And I kind of walked around outside for a few minutes, pressing against the membrane. And I had this intuitive understanding that this was something about the nature of reality they were trying to communicate to me, and the ability to form reality, and how, physical reality is made manifest. And all of us, and just as quickly as the urge to go outside came upon me, it vanished. I went inside, sat back down at my table, and then a couple minutes later, I looked over and there was a praying mantis insect by the window, over there. And so, I think that was another communication from the mantises, that they're trying to teach me, things about the nature of reality. And I get these, a lot of people talk about getting downloads. And ever since I had that onboard craft experience, I have a lot of these, like, closed eye visualizations where I will close my eyes and I start seeing images and movies, and sometimes it's just random imagery. Sometimes it's still images, kind of like a slideshow. Sometimes it's like little film strips. And sometimes I close my eyes and I see, it looks like hieroglyphics scrolling past extremely rapidly. And a lot of times this is also accompanied by, like, I'll get a tone in my ear, like this really loud tone in my ear, and then it's over. And so I don't honestly know what those are, except it seems like those may be downloads, and I wonder if that's just information that's being downloaded into me that, comes online at various points in the future when it's triggered or whatever. I don't really understand what those are, and that's a fairly new thing. So I don't really have a whole lot of insight into the what's or whys with that yet.
In December of 2024, you had hypnosis with Daniel Rekshan, I believe, of DSETI.
Yeah. Yeah. That was, I was just getting to know him, and he was explaining to me about, his practices, and he offered to take me through this regression session. And that was when, I didn't know what was going to happen, and I found myself once again out in the field. And that was the time at which it was communicated to me that the Mantids had made the field for me, that it had been specially created for me, and that they had taken elements of it from my memories, memories of places that, real places on Earth that were emotionally important to me, and that they had taken some of those memories and they had constructed this place that I could go and interact with craft, and that they were doing it, it was part of, what they did out of love for me.
Oh. Can you talk about the some of the messages that the Mantids might have left you to give to humanity?
Yeah, I feel like they have communicated some to me about like the densities, and that there are mantids in every density, and that it's almost like they're arranged in an almost fractal distribution throughout the densities, and that they're connected to the mantid insects on Earth. And so they've kind of given me a little bit of insight.
Well, you said that that humanity's approaching a technological singularity, and that things are speeding up as we approach.
Yes. Yeah, that is also one of the things that they have communicated to me, and I don't completely understand what that means. They have also told me that that in this life, that my job in this life, one of my roles is to fully step into my existence as a node of co-creation. The Mantids are really into frequency, and for a long time before I even met the Mantids, I would have this phrase in my mind: weavers in the frequency. And later I understood that was, I was being communicated to about the Mantids and how they operate. And they also told me that liminal boundaries, things that we perceive as liminal boundaries, are zones of co-creation in our density. And that when we interact with those liminal boundaries, that's what triggers the phenomenon, and of what we know as the phenomenon. And one of the properties of the phenomenon is the property of co-creative reciprocity. So they have communicated that to me. They communicated that non-duality is essentially correct as far as the ultimate nature of reality, at least as far as humans can understand it, and that love and collectivism are foundational properties of the cosmos somehow, and that energetic grids, like the contours of the subtle universe, are created out of these energetic grids, and the Mantids have a role in maintaining those. And I had been able to perceive those grids clairvoyantly since childhood, and that was another thing, I guess, that was explained to me after I started having these experiences with the Mantids, that okay, that's what those grids are, that I have been able to see my entire life. That nobody else could ever see, and that I didn't know what they were for. But yeah, they haven't given me a lot of insight into this, but they definitely have told me that we are approaching this singularity point, and that there is just this rapid, flood of awakening going on as humans prepare to take these next, like, we're on the cusp of major evolutionary steps forward, but they haven't given me any additional insight into that, really.
One subject that tends to come up a lot when it comes to experiencers is soul agreements. And one thing that you shared with me is that they said that they're involved in the reincarnation process and in facilitating of pre-incarnational agreements between souls. Now, that's a fascinating subject, so if you could get into that.
Yeah. I know that I have obviously had previous lives, And I've had some insight into the fact that, you know, our souls do operate from the standpoint of, you know, they are organized into soul groups, that we go through these multiple incarnational cycles with other energies in our soul groups, and that we have these pre-incarnational contracts that we sign. And people talk about them in terms of contracts, and I think that's good shorthand to use, but I don't get the impression, like some people do, that they are binding or that they are unbreakable. But I believe what I have been shown suggests that we do have these agreements that we make with other souls from our soul group that we incarnate with, that we have certain lessons, and that each of us are trying to learn in these cycles, and that we agree to interact with each other at these inflection points that help us. You know, it's this sort of mutual process of helping each other fulfill our evolutionary destiny. And the Mantids there's a type of Mantids, and I think that it's the older, because some of the Mantids, and this is one of the kind of Mantid that is my main guide, is one of these type of Mantids. They're primordial. They're almost as old as the universe. They are very, very ancient. And she has told me that she only takes the form of a mantis because she has had life cycles as a mantis. They identify with mantid beings. And so she frequently appears as a mantis being, although she technically is a being of pure light, a primordial light energy that just manifests as a mantis. But that those higher order, they're species of higher order mantids that are involved in sort of helping regulate and coordinate pre-incarnational contracts, but from a sort of meta level. Like, you are aware of your soul group, but the Mantids are aware of karmic interactions between multiple soul groups. You know, like they have this more like 30,000 foot view. And so they play a role in, you know, a broader coordination of soul functions as to how incarnational cycles play out for the benefit of the larger collective.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty. Mantids are amazing. Like, they're just, you know, and I understand that some people have had negative experiences, and I fully believe and honor those, but the Mantids have never been nothing but loving and warm and wise in their interactions with me.